long enough to stop believing you.
I never meant for you to find out like this.
He forged his father's will, my wife declared at the deposition. I just calmly slid a sealed envelope across the table. Her own lawyer's face went ash white when he broke the seal and saw who had co-signed the letter inside. Let me back up. Because sitting in that conference room, fluorescent lights humming overhead, fake leather chairs that squeaked every time someone shifted their weight, the smell of burnt coffee and expensive cologne mixing into something nauseating. I had the strangest sense of calm I'd felt in 2 years. Alyssa sat across from me in a cream-colored blouse that probably cost more than my monthly rent at Maya's apartment. She'd chosen it carefully, I knew. Everything about her appearance was calculated, hair pulled back in that effortless-looking bun that actually took 30 minutes and half a can of hairspray, minimal makeup that somehow took an hour, the persona of a grieving daughter fighting to protect her father's legacy from a manipulative husband. She was good at this, playing roles, being whoever she needed to be. Her lawyer, Gerald Hutchins, sat to her left, mid-50s, gray at the temples, wire-rimmed glasses that he adjusted every 45 seconds like clockwork. I'd counted. 3-piece suit that screamed, "I bill $400 an hour, and I'm worth every penny." He had the kind of smooth voice that made everything sound reasonable, even obvious lies. Brandon Cole sat 2 chairs down from Alyssa, supposedly just there as a colleague since he worked at the same firm. As if everyone in that room didn't know he'd been sleeping with my wife for the better part of 18 months. He wore a navy suit that fit him like it had been painted on. His jaw was tight, shoulders square, the posture of a man who thought he was in control. The court reporter sat at the end of the table, fingers poised over her machine, face blank and professional. She'd heard worse than this, probably. Divorces brought out the worst in people. My lawyer was a no-show. I'd fired him 3 weeks ago when I realized he was more interested in settling than fighting. So it was just me, a legal pad, 3 pens, and a manila envelope I'd been carrying in my jacket pocket for 6 days. "Mr. Mercer," Hutchins said, leaning forward with his fingers steepled. "Mrs. Mercer has provided substantial evidence that the revised will of Richard Hale, her father, was tampered with. Digital forensics show that the document was accessed and modified on your personal laptop on March 14th of last year. Do you deny accessing that document?" I looked at Alyssa. She met my gaze with that expression she did so well, hurt, betrayed, barely holding it together. Her eyes were a little wet. Not tears exactly, just enough moisture to catch the light. "I don't deny that the document was on my laptop," I said. My voice came out flat, almost bored. Hutchins pounced. "So you admit to accessing Richard Hale's will without authorization?" "I admit that someone accessed it using my laptop. I also admit that I wasn't home that day." Alyssa's mouth tightened, just for a second. Then the wounded expression was back. "Mr. Mercer, you were the IT professional in the household," Hutchins continued. "You had the technical knowledge and the means. You had motive. You stood to inherit significantly if Mr. Hale's original will was altered to include you as a beneficiary. And Mrs. Mercer has testified that you were alone with her father's documents on multiple occasions." Brandon shifted in his seat. The leather squeaked. He was watching me with those cold blue eyes, probably trying to figure out if I was going to crack. I could see the wheels turning, wondering if I'd fold, if I'd take whatever settlement they were about to offer and slink away like a good little victim. That look cost me 10 years of my life. Today, it finally starts paying dividends. "Richard wanted Dan protected," I said quietly. "He told me that himself, 2 weeks before he died." "A convenient claim," Hutchins said, "with no witnesses." "Actually," I said, reaching into my jacket, "about that." I pulled out the manila envelope. Standard 9x12, the kind you can buy at any office supply store. Nothing special about it except what was inside. I set it on the table between us. Alyssa's eyes flicked to it, then away, trying to look disinterested. But I saw her throat move as she swallowed. "What is this?" Hutchins asked. "Open it." He glanced at Alyssa. She gave a tiny nod. He picked up the envelope and broke the seal with one manicured finger. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a letter, notarized, dated 6 months ago. Signed by Harold Chen, Richard's accountant for 23 years. The second was a statement from Patricia Owens, Richard's oldest friend, and the executor of his actual, unmodified will. The third was a timeline I'd constructed from my laptop's audit logs, my router's access logs, and photographs from Alyssa's own Instagram account. Hutchins pulled out the letter first. His face, which had been calmly confident, went through several interesting color changes. Pink to red to something approaching ash gray. He read it once, then again. Then he looked up at Alyssa with an expression I'd pay good money to see again. "Alyssa," he said quietly, "we need to talk, now." "What does it say?" Brandon asked, leaning over. Hutchins held up one hand. "Not now." This was that evidence. The second document, Patricia's statement, corroborated everything. She'd been at the hospital when Richard died. She'd watched Alyssa and Brandon show up together, already acting like a couple. She'd heard them in the hallway, talking about handling the estate quickly before Dan could complicate things. Patricia hadn't wanted to get involved in family drama. She was 72 and wanted to spend her remaining years gardening, not in depositions. But when I'd called her, explained what was happening, she'd agreed to sign a statement. Because Richard had been her friend for 50 years, and she knew what he'd wanted. Photographic evidence that I was at a firm event, Alyssa's firm event, on March 14th. I was in 6 different Instagram photos from that night, standing next to associates and partners, holding champagne glasses, making small talk. Time-stamped. Geotagged. While I was there, my laptop at home had logged a user session. Someone had accessed it remotely using Alyssa's credentials, which I'd helped her set up years ago so she could grab files from my backup drive when she needed them. Someone had opened Richard's will file, modified it, saved it under a new name with a timestamp that made it look like I'd done it. But the router logs showed the IP address, and the IP address led to Brandon's phone, which had been connected to our home Wi-Fi that evening while I was at the firm event and Alyssa was supposedly working late. "This is..." Hutchins started, then stopped. He removed his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. "We need a recess." "No," Alyssa said sharply. Too sharply. Her composure was cracking. "No, this is... Harold must be mistaken. Or lying. Dan probably paid him to..." "Alyssa," Hutchins said firmly. "Be quiet. Right now." She looked at him like he'd slapped her. Brandon stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "This is bullshit. You can't prove..." "Sit down, Mr. Cole," Hutchins said. "You shouldn't even be here. This is a deposition for Mrs. Mercer's divorce proceedings, not a company meeting." "I'm here for moral support," Brandon said, but his voice had gone thin. "You're here because you've been sleeping with my client's wife for 18 months, Hutchins said bluntly. "And now there's documentation suggesting you accessed Mr. Mercer's personal computer to manipulate evidence. Do you understand what that means?" Brandon's jaw worked. No words came out. I leaned back in my chair. Let it squeak. All eyes turned to me. "I have copies," I said conversationally. "Uploaded to 3 different cloud services. Shared with my friend Maya Trent, who's a paralegal. She has instructions to send everything to the state bar if anything happens to me, or if you try to drag this out any further." Alyssa's hands were flat on the table. Her knuckles were white. "I learned from the best," I said. Hutchins was reading the documents again, flipping between them. His professional mask was gone now. He looked tired, older. "Mrs. Mercer, I need to speak with you privately, immediately. This deposition is suspended." "What about the forgery charges?" Alyssa demanded. "What about..." There are no forgery charges, Hutchins said flatly. Because as of 30 seconds ago, it's clear that if anyone committed forgery, it wasn't your husband. The silence that followed was beautiful, pure, and crystalline. I wanted to bottle it. Brandon moved first. He grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair and headed for the door. I need some air. Mr. Cole, Hutchins called after him. Don't go far. We'll need to discuss your involvement in... But Brandon was already gone, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft click. Alyssa stared at me across the table. For just a moment, the mask dropped completely. I saw rage there, pure, incandescent fury, and underneath it, something that might have been fear. You have no idea what you've started, she said quietly. I gathered my papers, slipped them back into my messenger bag, stood up, buttoned my jacket. She was wrong, I said out loud, to no one in particular. The court reporter's fingers paused over her machine. I knew exactly what I'd started. I walked to the door, turned back. I just hadn't decided yet how far I'd go. Then I stepped into the hallway, leaving them there in that conference room with their collapsed house of cards scattered across the table. The hallway was empty except for a paralegal pushing a cart of files. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Someone's phone was ringing in an office down the hall, going to voicemail. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. There was a strange lightness in my chest, like something that had been pressing down on me for 2 years had finally lifted. I took the elevator down to the parking garage, got in my beat-up Honda Civic that desperately needed an oil change, sat there for a moment in the dim concrete space, listening to the sound of my own breathing. Then I started laughing. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh that would have worried anyone who heard it. The kind that came from somewhere dark and hungry and finally satisfied. I pulled out my phone. Texted Maya. It's done. Phase 1 complete. Her response came back in seconds. How bad? Hutchins looked like he was going to have a stroke. Good. Come over. Tell me everything. I started the car, pulled out of the garage into afternoon sunlight that seemed too bright, too normal for what had just happened upstairs. As I merged into traffic, heading toward Maya's apartment across town, I realized something. I wasn't done. Not even close. This was just the opening move. While you're here, hit the hype button, don't forget to subscribe and support this channel with a like. And tell us below, have you ever faced something like this? 2 years earlier, I'd actually believed I had a pretty good life. Not perfect. Not like the Instagram couples with their matching workout gear and coordinated vacation photos. But good. Solid. Real. I worked from home most days, doing IT security consulting for mid-sized companies that couldn't afford full-time staff. The work was steady, if not exciting. I'd analyze their systems, find the vulnerabilities, write reports that usually said the same thing, update your software, use better passwords, stop clicking on phishing emails. Sometimes I'd get called in for digital forensics when they suspected an employee was stealing data or leaking information to competitors. Alyssa worked at Crawford, Morrison & Wade, a regional law firm in a glass tower downtown. She'd started as a junior associate 6 years into our marriage, grinding through the long hours and demanding partners. By the time we hit 10 years, she was being groomed for junior partner. The hours got longer. The cases got bigger. The money got better. We lived in a development called Maple Ridge Estates, which was neither a ridge nor particularly full of maples. Just a cul-de-sac of identical houses with slightly different colored shutters and professionally landscaped yards that all used the same 3 plants. Our house was the one with the blue shutters and the front door that stuck in the summer. Richard Hale, Alyssa's father, lived 40 minutes away in the same house where she'd grown up. 3-bedroom ranch with a finished basement and a garage workshop where he'd spent 30 years building furniture as a hobby. He'd owned a small contracting business, sold it for a decent sum when he retired, and spent his days reading military history books and complaining about city council meetings. He tolerated me. That was probably the best way to describe it. He'd never said I wasn't good enough for his daughter, but he'd never said I was, either. We coexisted at family dinners, talking about sports and weather and nothing that mattered. The neighbors on Maple Ridge were exactly what you'd expect. The Parkers across the street, Tom and Linda, were in their 50s and seemed to have nothing better to do than watch the street through their front window. They knew when everyone left for work, when the mail came, when anyone had overnight guests. Linda ran the neighborhood Facebook group, which was 90% complaints about people parking on the street and 10% lost cat photos. Next to them were the Robinsons, a younger couple with 2 kids who were always riding bikes in circles in the cul-de-sac. Nice enough. We'd wave, make small talk about the weather, and then there was Mrs. Kowalski at the end, a widow who'd lived there for 30 years and treated every new neighbor like a temporary nuisance. She kept her lawn immaculate and glared at anyone who let their grass get half an inch too long. It was all very normal, very suburban, very safe, until it wasn't. The first crack appeared about 18 months before the deposition. Little things. Alyssa started working later. Not unusual. Associate hours at a law firm could be brutal. But it was the kind of late, 10 p.m., 11, sometimes not coming home until after midnight. "Big case," she'd say, dropping her bag by the door, heading straight to the shower. "Discovery hell. You know how it is." I didn't actually, but I nodded, made supportive husband noises, heated up leftovers when she said she'd eaten at the office. Then her phone habits changed. She'd always been glued to her phone. Everyone in her line of work was. But now, she took it everywhere. Bathroom, shower. She'd set it face down on the counter, and if it buzzed, she'd grab it like it might explode if she waited too long. "Work?" I'd ask. "Work," she'd confirm, already typing. I told myself it was the stress, the partnership track, the pressure. I'd read articles about how common it was for couples to go through dry spells. We'd been together 12 years. This was normal. This was just a phase. Tom Parker mentioned it first. I was getting the mail one afternoon when he called over from his driveway. "Hey, Dan, Alyssa working with that Cole guy a lot lately?" I looked up. Tom was washing his car even though it had rained that morning and would probably rain again by evening, finding reasons to be outside. "Brandon Cole? I think so. Why?" Tom shrugged. "Just seems like they're both working pretty late. Saw his car here a couple times when I was up late watching TV. That fancy black Mercedes. Just wondered if there was some big case or something." "Yeah," I said slowly. "Big case." "Must be," Tom said. He sprayed his hubcap with the hose. "Anyway, Linda wanted me to remind you about the HOA meeting next week. Something about mailbox regulations." "Right, thanks." I went inside, put the mail on the counter, stood there staring at nothing for a while. Brandon Cole was a senior partner at Alyssa's firm, divorced, late 30s. He drove a Mercedes S-Class and wore suits that probably cost more than my car. I'd met him twice at firm events. He had a handshake like a vice and a smile that showed too many teeth. His car had been at our house, late at night. I told myself there was a reasonable explanation. They were working on something sensitive. They needed privacy. Our house was closer to the courthouse than her office. Something. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. 2 days later, I had a legitimate reason to check the home network. One of my clients had been hit with a ransomware attack, and I was helping them trace the entry point. I needed to make sure my own systems were secure, my backups were clean. I was running through the network logs when I noticed something. Alyssa's iPad, the one she barely used anymore, the one she'd left sitting on the kitchen counter charging, was syncing with her phone. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that even as I was doing it. It was a violation of privacy, of trust. All the things I'd tell a client never to do if they suspected a breach. But I looked. The Messages app was open, synced from her phone, hundreds of text conversations, most of them work-related or with her friends or her father. And then there was Brandon Cole. The first message I saw was from 3 days ago. Brandon. Can't stop thinking about you. Alyssa. Same. This is dangerous. Brandon. Worth it. I scrolled up. The conversation went back months. Photos, explicit ones. Hotel addresses, times and dates, complaints about their spouses. His ex-wife, me. Jokes about how she'd have to service the husband later so I wouldn't get suspicious. One message made my hand shake so hard I had to set the iPad down. Brandon. Don't tempt me. Alyssa. He's gotten so soft. Remember when I said he used to be in decent shape? Now he's just there, like furniture. At least he's useful for fixing the Wi-Fi. Brandon. When you finally pull the trigger on the divorce, make sure you get everything. Guy like that doesn't deserve shit. Alyssa. Working on it. I read that conversation 3 times. Then I took screenshots. Every single message, every photo, every hotel receipt she'd forwarded him for reimbursement, because apparently she was even expensing their affair. I created a new cloud account she didn't know about. Uploaded everything. Changed the password to something she'd never guess. Set up 2-factor authentication. Then I carefully closed the Messages app, put the iPad back exactly where I'd found it, plugged it back into the charger at the same angle. And I sat on the couch in the dark for 4 hours, waiting for her to come home. She arrived at 11:30. I heard her car pull into the garage, the door closing behind her. The sound of her heels on the tile floor. She jumped when she saw me sitting there in the dark living room. Jesus, Dan, you scared me. I turned on the lamp, looked at her. She was perfect as always, hair still neat, makeup still flawless. But her blouse was buttoned wrong. One button off, the whole thing crooked. How was work? I asked. Exhausting. She dropped her bag on the counter. I need a shower. Did you eat? At the office. Really? I stood up, walked toward her slowly. What did you have? She blinked. What? For dinner, at the office. What did you eat? I don't know, sandwich? Why are you being weird? I fixed the network today, I said conversationally. There was a sync issue with your iPad. I noticed it was pulling messages from your phone. I watched her face, watched the exact moment she understood. Her mouth opened, closed. Dan, how long? How long, Alyssa? It's complicated. Is it Brandon Cole? Her face went pale, then red. Then she straightened up, and I saw something shift in her expression. The caught look disappeared. Something harder took its place. You went through my messages? Her voice went sharp. You spied on me? I saw them by accident, then I read them, all of them. That's a violation of my privacy. She grabbed her bag. I'm not doing this right now. We're absolutely doing this right now. You're being abusive. You went through my phone. You called me furniture. We were yelling now. I didn't even care that the windows were open, that the Parkers could probably hear every word. I work. You push papers. You fix Wi-Fi for companies too cheap to hire real IT people. I'm a lawyer, Dan. I'm building a career. I'm becoming someone. He's divorced. He was married when you started. Her hand flew up. For a second, I thought she was going to hit me. But she just pointed at the door. Get out. This is my house, too. Get out. No. She grabbed a plate from the counter and threw it. Not at me, just at the wall. It shattered. The Parkers' living room light came on across the street. You want to know the truth? She said, her voice shaking. The truth is that you're small. You've always been small. And I'm done pretending that small is enough. I stared at her. This woman I'd been married to for 12 years. This woman I'd loved, supported, built a life with. I didn't recognize her. You'll hear from my lawyer, she said quietly. And if you ever spy on me again, I'll file a restraining order. For reading texts you left synced to a device in my own house? For harassment, for emotional abuse, for stalking, don't think I won't. She grabbed her bag again and headed for the stairs. I heard her bedroom door slam. A few minutes later, Brandon's Mercedes pulled up outside. She came back down with an overnight bag and walked right past me without a word. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I stood there in the living room, surrounded by pieces of broken plate, while the Parkers pretended not to watch from across the street. My phone buzzed. Email notification from ahalacrawfordmorrison.com. Subject: divorce proceedings. The email was brief and professional. She'd retained Gerald Hutchins. He was requesting my contact information for service of papers. They'd be filing for divorce in the next week. She was requesting temporary spousal support and division of marital assets. And, this was the kicker, she was suggesting that I'd been emotionally unstable and controlling throughout the marriage, that she feared for her safety, that her father, Richard Hale, had witnessed concerning behavior. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to my new secret cloud account. Then I looked up at the ceiling and said, very quietly, "Okay." That was the night I realized she wasn't just leaving, she was erasing me. The Crawford, Morrison and Wade annual charity gala needed technical support, and I was suddenly very interested in volunteering my services. I called their event coordinator, a harried-sounding woman named Jennifer who probably had 300 other things to do before the gala. "Hi, my name's Dan Mercer. I'm a freelance IT and AV specialist. I heard through a friend that you might need help with your audio-visual setup for the charity event." "Oh God, yes." The relief in her voice was immediate. "Our usual guy just canceled. Broke his arm. We have a whole presentation queue for the keynote, and I don't even know how to work the projector. I can handle that. I've done corporate events before. Presentations, microphone setups, emergency troubleshooting. What's your rate? For charity? I'll do it pro bono. Just add my name to the volunteer list for the tax write-off." There was a pause. Then, "Seriously?" "Seriously. I believe in the cause." I did believe in the Children's Legal Defense Fund, just not in the people hosting the event. "You're a lifesaver. Can you come by the venue this week to check the equipment?" "Absolutely." 2 days later, I was at the downtown Marriott, in the grand ballroom where the gala would be held. Crystal chandeliers, burgundy carpet, tables for 300, a stage at the front with a podium and a projection screen. Jennifer showed me around. "We need the projector working for Brandon's speech. He has slides about the firm's pro bono work and client success stories. And we need microphones for the podium and the silent auction announcements." "No problem. I'll test everything. Make sure you have backups and be here early on event night to handle any issues." "You're amazing. Seriously. I was about to have a panic attack." I spent 3 hours testing equipment. The projector was a standard model, connected to a laptop via HDMI. The laptop was the firm's, not Brandon's, personal machine, which would have been locked down. This was a presentation computer they used for events, basic security, default login, connected to the firm's Wi-Fi. I didn't touch anything, not yet. I just learned the system, memorized the passwords that were written on a sticky note under the keyboard, because some things never change, noted where the backup equipment was stored. "I think we're all set," I told Jennifer. "I'll be here at 4 p.m. on event night for final checks." "Thank you so much." I drove back to Maya's apartment. She was waiting with coffee and worry. "You got in," she said, not a question. "I got in. Dan, I know what I'm doing." "Do you?" "Because this stopped being about justice a while ago. Now it's about revenge." "What's the difference?" She stared at me. "Justice is about making things right. Revenge is about making yourself feel better by hurting someone else." "Then I guess I'm interested in revenge." "That's not healthy. Neither is being framed for felony forgery by your wife and her boyfriend. You're becoming someone you're not. Maybe I'm becoming who I always should have been." I sat down at the kitchen table. My whole life I've been the nice guy, the understanding husband, the one who doesn't make waves, and where did that get me? Cheated on, framed, nearly destroyed. So now you're going to destroy them first. Now I'm going to make sure they can't hurt anyone else. By humiliating them at a charity event? By exposing them for what they are, in front of their colleagues, their clients, the legal community they've been lying to. Maya rubbed her face. What's your plan? Specifically. I pulled out my laptop, opened a folder. Brandon's keynote speech is about the firm's commitment to integrity and protecting the vulnerable. He'll have slides showing all their pro bono cases, all their community involvement. And you're going to replace his slides with what? The truth. Screenshots of Alyssa's affair messages, excerpts from Harold Chen's letter about Richard's real intentions, timeline documentation of the escrow account irregularities, Marcus Webb's complaint about the Merriweather case delays. You can't do that. That's public information. Everything I'm planning to show is either my own personal property, the messages from Alyssa, or documented evidence we've gathered legally. Harold's letter is real. The escrow timeline is based on public case records. Marcus's statement is his own words. It's the truth, Maya. That's all it is. The truth displayed publicly, while Brandon stands at a podium and lies about integrity. She was quiet for a long time. They'll sue you, she said finally, for defamation, for harassment, for whatever they can think of. Let them. Discovery works both ways. If they sue me, I get to subpoena their bank records, their firm's escrow accounts, everything. You're betting that they won't risk discovery. I'm betting that they're smart enough to know when they've lost. Maya stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the street. You're enjoying this, she said quietly. That's what scares me. You're enjoying watching them panic. Shouldn't I? They tried to destroy me. They almost succeeded. Now I'm fighting back. Fighting back is one thing. This is, she turned to face me. This is scorched earth. This is making sure they never recover. Good. Dan, they don't deserve to recover, Maya. Brandon's a fraud and a gambler who stole from client escrow accounts. Alyssa helped frame me for a crime I didn't commit. They deserve whatever's coming. What about you? What do you deserve? What kind of question is that? You used to be kind, patient. You used to believe the system would work if you just did the right thing and waited your turn. Now you're... She gestured helplessly. Now you're this. Maybe this is who I always was. Maybe I was just waiting for a good enough reason. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Maybe she didn't. I need some air, she said. She grabbed her jacket and left. I sat alone in the apartment, looked at the evidence files on my laptop, thought about the gala. Was I enjoying this? Yes. Was that wrong? I didn't care. Over the next week, I prepared. Not just the presentation, everything. I secured Harold's notarized statement, got it certified, made copies, stored backups in 3 different locations. I got Patricia Owens to sign her statement about Richard's intentions and what she'd overheard at the hospital. I compiled Marcus Webb's complaint about the settlement delays and got him to sign a formal declaration. I created a timeline document showing the escrow account irregularities, cross-referenced with Brandon's known gambling activities, documented through public case records where casinos had flagged him. Everything was true. Everything was documented. Everything would stand up if challenged. Then I created the presentation. Simple slides, white background, black text, no fancy graphics, just information. Slide 1. Brandon Cole and Alyssa Mercer, a pattern of deception. Slide 2. Text message screenshots, redacted for anything too explicit but clear enough. Slide 3. Hotel receipts and dates. Slide 4. Harold Chen's letter, excerpts. Slide 5. Timeline of Richard Hale's will and the forgery frame. Slide 6. Merriweather v. Quantum Industries. Settlement delays and unexplained transfers. Slide 7. Marcus Webb's statement. Slide 8. A simple question in large letters. Is this the integrity Crawford, Morrison, and Wade represents? 8 slides. Maybe 90 seconds of display time. That's all I'd need. The night before the gala, Maya came back to the apartment. She'd been staying at a friend's place for 3 days. "I'm not going to stop you," she said, "but I want you to understand something. After tomorrow, there's no going back. They'll come after you legally, professionally, maybe even physically, and you'll have burned every bridge to normal life." I burned those bridges the day I read Alyssa's messages. No, she burned them. You're just setting fire to what's left. Semantics. It's not. She sat down across from me. "Dan, I care about you. I'm worried about you. This path you're on ends with them getting what they deserve. It ends with you becoming someone you'll hate. I'll take that risk." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she pulled something out of her bag, a small voice recorder. "What's that?" "Insurance. Tomorrow night after your little presentation, there's going to be chaos. Brandon and Alyssa are going to say things, do things, and you're going to want evidence of their reactions." She pushed the recorder across the table. "Keep this on you. Record everything, not for revenge, for protection, because they're going to claim you threatened them, harassed them, endangered them. You'll need proof of what actually happened." I picked up the recorder. It was small enough to fit in a jacket pocket. "Thank you. Fair enough." That night I barely slept. I kept running through the plan, kept imagining how it would feel to watch Brandon's face when his slides changed, when his speech about integrity turned into a public execution. Part of me knew Maya was right. This wasn't justice. This was revenge. Pure, calculated revenge. But I was past caring about the difference. At 3 p.m. the next day, I got a text from an unknown number. "Last chance. Walk away. You'll regret this." I looked at the message for a few seconds. Then I deleted it and got dressed. Black slacks, white button-down shirt, a name tag that said AV Support, Dan Mercer. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked normal, professional, like someone who was just there to make sure the microphones worked. But my hands were steady in a way they hadn't been in months. My breathing was calm. There was a clarity in my head that felt almost euphoric. This is what purpose felt like. I drove to the Marriott, parked in the garage, took the elevator to the ballroom level. Jennifer was running around like her hair was on fire. "Dan! Thank God! The podium microphone is cutting out and we have a situation with table assignments and I think I'm having a heart attack. I'll handle the mic. You handle the tables. It's going to be fine." "You're a saint." I went to the stage, checked the microphone, loose connection, fixed in 30 seconds, tested the projector, loaded the firm's official presentation onto the laptop. Then I waited until Jennifer was busy with a seating chart crisis. I opened the laptop's file browser, found the presentation file, replaced it with my version, named it identically so no one would notice. Then I cleared the file history and closed the laptop. Done. I spent the next hour doing legitimate work, testing backup microphones, adjusting speaker volumes, helping set up the silent auction displays. At 6 p.m., guests started arriving. Black tie, cocktail dresses, lawyers and judges and city council members, donors and clients and people who thought they were attending a normal charity gala. I stayed in the AV booth at the back of the ballroom. Dimmed lights, control panel, perfect view of the stage. At 6:30, Alyssa arrived. She was wearing a dark blue evening gown that probably cost a month of my rent. Hair up, diamonds at her neck and ears. She looked stunning. Brandon was beside her in a tuxedo. They were playing it carefully, not holding hands, not standing too close. But there was an intimacy in how they moved together, how he touched her elbow when guiding her through the crowd. I watched them make the rounds, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, laughing at jokes. They looked happy, successful, untouchable. Not for long. At 7 p.m., dinner was served. I ate a sandwich from my bag and watched the ballroom. 300 people eating overpriced chicken and making small talk. At 7:45, the senior partner, a man named David Morrison, took the stage, tapped the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight." The speech was predictable. Thanks to donors, importance of legal aid for children, proud of their pro bono work. And now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for the evening. He's been with our firm for 8 years, leading some of our most important cases. He's a champion for justice and a dedicated servant of this community. Please welcome Brandon Cole. Applause. Brandon stood, buttoned his jacket, walked to the stage. He looked confident, relaxed, a man who'd given this speech 100 times before. He shook Morrison's hand, stood at the podium, smiled at the crowd. "Thank you, David, and thank you all for being here tonight. I'm honored to speak to you about something I'm deeply passionate about: integrity and the practice of law." I leaned forward in the AV booth. My hand hovered over the laptop keyboard. Brandon continued. "At Crawford, Morrison and Wade, we believe that the law is more than just rules and regulations. It's about trust. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. It's about doing the right thing, even when it's difficult." The projection screen behind him showed the firm's logo. Over the past year, we've handled over 100 pro bono cases. We've helped families stay in their homes. We've protected children in custody battles. We've fought for workers who were exploited by their employers. Next slide was supposed to be photos of happy clients. I pressed a key. The screen changed. Slide 1. Brandon Cole and Alyssa Mercer. A pattern of deception. The room went very quiet. Brandon kept talking for a second before he noticed. Then he turned around. He saw the slide. His face went white. "What?" He looked at the back of the room, at the AV booth, at me. I pressed the next key. Slide 2. Text message screenshots. Brandon. "Can't stop thinking about you." Alyssa. "Same. This is dangerous. More messages, dates, times. Enough to make the context very clear." Someone gasped. Multiple someones. I heard chairs scraping as people stood up to see better. Brandon grabbed for the laptop on the podium, but it was only displaying his notes. The projection was running from my booth. "Turn it off!" he shouted. "Turn it off now!" I pressed the next key. Slide 3. Hotel receipts, dates matching text conversations, Brandon's name on the credit card. The room was pure chaos now, people talking, pointing, pulling out phones. I saw Alyssa stand up from her table. Her face was ashen. Next slide, Harold Chen's letter, excerpts in large print. Richard Hale wrote to his accountant expressing concern about his daughter's relationship with Brandon Cole and his wishes to protect Dan Mercer in his will. Brandon jumped off the stage, started running toward the AV booth. I locked the door, kept pressing keys. Slide 5. The timeline. March 14th, firm event. Brandon's phone accessing Dan's laptop. The forged will created. Security was running toward the booth now. Brandon was pounding on the door, but I had 60 seconds, maybe less, but enough. Slide 6. Merriweather v. Quantum Industries, 7-month delay, unexplained transfers, Marcus Webb's statement. David Morrison was on stage now, trying to speak into the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. There's been a technical malfunction." "That's not a malfunction," someone shouted. "That's evidence." Next slide. Marcus Webb's signed statement about the settlement delays. Final slide. Is this the integrity Crawford, Morrison, and Wade represents? Security reached the door, started pounding on it with Brandon. I sat back, looked at the chaos in the ballroom. People were filming with their phones, arguing, staring at the screen in shock. Alyssa was trying to leave, but people were blocking her, asking questions, taking pictures. Brandon was screaming at the security guard to break down the door. I leaned into the microphone that controlled the room's PA system. "Already paid," I said. My voice echoed through the ballroom. 10 years married. I'd like a refund. Then I unlocked the door, Security burst in, two large men in ill-fitting suits. "Hands up!" one of them shouted. I raised my hands. "I'm the volunteer AV support. There seems to have been a mix-up with the presentation files." "Please don't assault me in front of 300 witnesses," I said calmly. One of the security guards grabbed my arm. "Sir, you need to come with us." "Absolutely. Where are we going?" "Security office." "Lead the way." They escorted me out of the booth, through the ballroom. Every phone camera in the room followed us. I saw Linda Vasquez, the firm's bookkeeper, staring at the projection screen with her hand over her mouth. I saw David Morrison on his phone, probably calling the firm's crisis management team. I saw Alyssa, frozen at her table, mascara running down her face. As I was led toward the exit, I passed Brandon. He was being held back by two other security guards. "We'll see," I said. They took me to the security office, asked me to sit in a plastic chair. One of the guards called the police. I sat there for 20 minutes, peaceful, calm. Finally, two cops showed up, not the detectives from before, just patrol officers responding to a disturbance call. "Mr. Mercer?" one of them asked. "That's me. We're getting some conflicting stories about what happened here tonight." I was volunteering as AV support. There was an issue with the presentation files. Wrong file got loaded. Wrong file. Very wrong file. Though technically accurate, everything displayed was true and documented. The officer looked at his partner. "You want to handle this, or should I?" "I want to go home and not deal with lawyers yelling at each other." They asked me a few more questions, took my information, told me I'd probably be hearing from the hotel about a trespassing ban. "Am I under arrest?" I asked. "For what? Playing the wrong PowerPoint?" That's what I thought. They let me go. I walked out through the hotel lobby. The gala was breaking up, people streaming out, talking in groups, phones out, already posting on social media. I got to my car in the parking garage. Sat there for a moment. My phone was blowing up. Texts from unknown numbers, emails, a voicemail from Gerald Hutchins demanding I call him immediately. I ignored all of it. Instead, I called Maya. "Did you do it?" she asked. "I did it." "How bad?" "Bad. Very bad. It's probably already on Twitter." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Are you okay?" "I'm perfect." "Dan, I'm coming back to your place. We should probably talk about next steps." "Next steps?" "The lawsuits, the depositions, the bar complaints they're going to file against themselves trying to get to me." "You sound happy." "That's because I am." I hung up, started the car. As I drove out of the garage, I passed Brandon and Alyssa standing next to his Mercedes. They were screaming at each other, really screaming, the kind of fight that ends relationships. I slowed down, rolled down my window. "Everything okay?" I called. Brandon turned. For a second, I thought he was going to charge at me, but he just stood there, hands in fists, shaking with rage. "You have no idea what you've started," Alyssa screamed. "Actually," I said, "I know exactly what I've started, and I know exactly how it ends." I drove away. In the rearview mirror, I watched them implode. The thing about lighting a match is, you don't have to stick around to watch the whole building go up.